What does a sausage tell us about the European Union? We're told that there are costs and benefits of EU membership, and yet many of us haven't a clue as to what those costs and benefits are. And you can learn a lot by looking at individual objects. So, the British sausage, or rather the animals that we make it from. Now in Britain we have some of the strongest animal welfare rules, certainly in Europe but also around the world. We have them, why? Well, we're a nation of animal lovers. And we don't just want to look after the animals that we keep as pets at home, we also want to look after our farm animals. So British legal requirements for raising of animals on the farm has always been set pretty high. Now over the years, as a member of the EU, we've been going to Brussels and trying to persuade the rest of Europe to come up to our animal welfare requirements. In effect, we've been wrapping all their farmers in more and more red tape. Have they come up to our level? Well, almost, but not quite. And in that gap, there lies the problem for the British pig farmer. Because the rest of the European Union doesn't have to follow such strict welfare requirements, it's cheaper for them to raise their pigs and to produce sausage meat and other pork products. And because Britain is part of the EU and its single market, we can't put up trade barriers to stop all that cheap meat coming into our country. What does that do in the supermarket? Well, it would be fine if we all wanted to buy British all the time. And yet we don't. We like to search out a bargain. And British farmers say that those imports, those cheap imports, are undermining their business. And that's just one example of the costs and benefits that EU membership brings, all told through the humble British sausage. What does a clock tell us about the European Union? Have you ever heard of Greenwich Mean Time? Britain's been telling the world how to set its watches since 1884. But now time has taken on a distinctly European feel, thanks to the Working Time Directive. Eurosceptics hate it. It says that on average you can't work more than 48 hours a week, that you get 11 hours rest every single day, and that you can take 28 days of holiday every year. Before the Working Time Directive came in 1998, there was no law here in Britain that made your employer give you any time off at all. Right, here's a lorry and its driver, Paul, and here's the simplified version of the rules that Paul has to follow. One of the big complaints about the Working Time Directive is how complex it all is. EU clock watching doesn't apply to all jobs. Now Brussels wants to rewrite the Working Time Directive, the EU's 28 member states want to rewrite it as well, the European Parliament wants to rewrite it, but they can't agree on how to do it. So for now, we're stuck with it. What does your mobile phone tell you about the European Union? To find out, let's put this expensive bit of kit through an industrial shredder. Why are we shredding expensive phones? Well, to shed some light on what the EU does and how it works. One of the Union's great achievements has been to make sure that whatever country we travel to in the EU, we don't get hit with massive roaming charges whenever we text or make a phone call or use the internet. For a while now, the EU has been gradually reducing the roaming charges, and from next year it's going to ban them altogether. Would Britain still benefit from that if it left the EU? When a smartphone is thrown away, there are all sorts of regulations from the EU regarding the recycling of the rare earths and other materials inside the phone. And there are also plenty of other EU rules on the mobile phone networks and the type of radio frequencies that these phones operate on. The point is that the mobile is, well, just that, mobile. So does that mean that the EU approach is the right one Well, certainly it seems to make better sense to bring in EU-wide, Europe-wide rules that govern such a borderless technology. And yet at the same time, many also say that even better would be a truly global regulatory system. What does a kiss tell you about the European Union? This is a story of red lips and red tape. Now, beauty, of course, is big business. In Elizabethan times, we used to put arsenic and lead on our faces. No longer. First, back in 1976, there was the European Cosmetics Directive. A directive is a legislative act that sets out a goal that all EU countries must achieve. Each country writes its own laws to make sure this happens. The Cosmetics Directive banned certain harmful ingredients from makeup. But since then, the EU's brought in more centralised rules in the form of the EU's regulation on cosmetic products. The European cosmetics industry tends to like these standardised European rules. But are they keeping up with the global marketplace? The fastest growing area of cosmetic sales at the moment is online, and if you buy cosmetics online, then the EU rules don't necessarily offer you the same level of protection. What does an airplane tell you about the European Union? It all looked very different 40 years ago.
May I have your attention for a few moments, please? You may unfasten your seatbelts and smoke if you wish. Ashtrays are provided in the arm of your chair.
British Airways really did fly the national flag. It was pretty much the only British airline that was allowed to fly in and out of the country. Back then, our government made an individual agreement with each and every country that we flew to. Only 2 airlines were allowed to fly any particular route. They limited the number of passengers that could fly every week, and they set the prices. And now any EU airline can fly from any EU country to another one. We've got cheaper flights, more choice, and more pollution, environmentalists say. We've also got better compensation rights if and when our flights are delayed. Would all of this change if we were to leave the EU? That, I'm afraid, is yet another thing that it's impossible to predict.
The drinking water fountain is in the centre of the cabin. Cocktails and lunch will be served in 1 hour's time. In the meanwhile, we will be happy to serve you with drinks and cigarettes, which will be available in 10 minutes.